from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kate Davidson, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, the U.S. readies a potential $20 billion lifeline for Argentina. Just a day after President Trump met with Argentina's premier, reporting tonight, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is preparing a $20 billion swap line to Argentina and ready to buy the country's foreign bonds. We'll have the details and the market reaction.
Plus, the shutdown clock ticks down just days before a government closure.
We are here today in the Capitol, ready to get to work, ready to meet with anyone, anytime, any place, in order to avoid a painful Republican-caused government shutdown.
Our reporting on Democrats' posturing after a closed-door sit-down with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Will Democrats stonewall Republicans, and will the president continue to go for a budget without Democratic input? More on the perspective from Capitol Hill when we speak with Republican Congressman Carlos Gimenez up ahead.
Also tonight, news that Intel is looking to receive another major investment, with Apple now reportedly in Intel's sights as the troubled chip maker seeks a multi-billion-dollar investment. We'll have the details. As well, new reporting on the thwarted plot to take out cell service near the UN, how the Secret Service dismantled a network of devices, and who could be behind it. We'll discuss that and a lot more when Brandon Pugh, the principal cyber advisor to the Secretary of the Army, joins us up ahead. But we begin with news from the United Nations today. The president of Ukraine and the president of Argentina both taking to the podium a day after President Trump did the same, as leaders from the Middle East met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, discussing conflicts still raging in the region, of course, including the escalating war in Gaza. Here's part of what Rubio had to say during that bilateral meeting.
We want it to end in a Gaza that is free of terrorism, that is free of extremism, that does not pose a threat to Israel or any other part of the region, and where the people, the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza, have an opportunity to live in the peace and in the prosperity that we all want, not just for the region, but for our own countries and for the world.
Rubio's comments come as several nations rally behind Palestine statehood this week, despite pushback from the U.S. and Israel, and coming shortly after Secretary Rubio met with Russia's Sergei Lavrov amid Russia's continued bombardment of Ukraine. A lot to discuss with Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams, who joins us from World Headquarters in New York. He has been covering the United Nations General Assembly for us. Nick, let's start with the matter of Israel. This is not something, obviously, that the Trump administration wanted to see, with multiple countries, including a couple of members of the G7, in fact, declaring their support of Palestinian statehood. What does it mean for the war in Gaza?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think what you're seeing here essentially is the Trump administration and Israel obviously standing in the way. So you could have a situation like we saw early this week, where a lot of countries, France, Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and several others came together and launched this big event where they recognized Palestinian statehood formally, which would have been unthinkable five or 10 years ago. Now that's essentially been done, but is the Palestinian territory actually any closer to genuine statehood? No, this was almost entirely a symbolic effort, because Israel on the ground is not going to allow that in any circumstance. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been very clear about that. And then the one person who could potentially make that happen in the long term through leverage of his own, President Donald Trump, is also making clear he sides with Israel. And he essentially sees no reason and thinks only that a Palestinian state would make the situation worse. So a very interesting symbolic effort that does reflect sort of shifting support broadly in the international community. But on the ground, I think the situation is largely the same.
Nick, we also saw yesterday this remarkable social media post from President Trump talking about Russia and really belittling its economy, threatening heavy tariffs. Was this really the big shift it's being taken as, or is it just, more bluster to try to bring Moscow to the table?
Well, I think a couple of things happened there that are really interesting. One, you did see President Trump shift off his position that there would need to be concessions on land from both Russia and Ukraine. So we're all trying to figure out still what precipitated that change, if it was something that Volodymyr Zelensky said that made the president now think that Ukraine can take back all its territory, where in the past he had essentially said that wasn't going to be possible. But when you look at the end of that tweet, what he essentially said was, hey, good luck. talk to you later. And it was almost like a mic drop from the president suggesting that the U.S. wasn't going to have any more involvement in this conflict. And that's exactly the thing that the European countries don't want to see. Ukraine as well, obviously. So President Trump's willing to sell weapons to European countries to pass on to Ukraine. But amid that shift, there was this unsettling tone at the end that suggested the president is basically washing his hands of the conflict. And that's something that European leaders in Ukraine are still trying to reckon with.
Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams, thank you. And it was Argentinian President Milei's turn at the UN lectern today. Argentina's leader addressing the General Assembly as a deal to help his country is hammered behind the scenes. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the U.S. is discussing a $20 billion swap line with Argentina and is ready to buy up the country's dollar bonds. The move is seen as giving Argentina's President Javier Milei a bridge until key midterm elections next month. That potential $20 billion lifeline coming just months after Milei dismantled an ethics investigation into his own actions around a Libya cryptocurrency scandal earlier this year that saw investors lose hundreds of millions of dollars. For all the details, we turn now to Bloomberg Treasury reporter Dan Flatley, who joins us live from World Headquarters in New York. Dan, could you just take a minute to explain to us here how significant is this, the types of moves that Secretary Bessent said the U.S. is contemplating? How unusual would this be?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kate. And I think, I was asked this just a few minutes ago on another program. And the way that I sort of, phrased it was there are moves that are unprecedented, there are moves that are unusual, and there are moves that are rare. I think it's safe to call this a rare move. Is it unusual? Probably. Is it unprecedented? That is something that I think a lot of folks are going to be looking at over the coming days and weeks. But what we know at this point is that President Milei of Argentina met with President Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent yesterday here in New York. That meeting lasted, 30 to 40 minutes. I was at the hotel where the Argentine delegation was staying. We got a little bit of a hint from the finance minister, Luis Caputo, when he came back from that meeting, and he said that there was a figure that was discussed, but he declined to give that figure. Today, we know that is $20 billion of a swap line, and it's a bit of an unusual arrangement in terms of how this will work. The Treasury itself will sort of extend this offer using its exchange stabilization fund, which is something that it has access to and can use in certain circumstances. But this is certainly an unusual move to extend this to Argentina as we await the results of these midterm elections there at the end of October.
Dan, Scott Bessent, who I know you spent a lot of time with, has made clear that the Treasury will be in line with President Trump's priorities politically, economically. How does this align with America First?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Joe, and it's been interesting to follow this story over the last several months. I was actually in Buenos Aires in April with the secretary when he met with Milei down there and first sort of floated this idea of being willing to offer Argentina this support. One of the words or phrases that he used to describe Milei during that meeting was an ideological fellow traveler. So I think the Trump administration and Bessent in particular sees Milei and the economic reforms that he has put in place in Argentina as something that is of a piece with the Make America Great Again movement. Milei himself has kind of borrowed that phrase and has said, make Argentina great again. So, it is an interesting situation where you have the U.S. sort of pulling back aid in other areas, yet extending this major offer of support to one nation in Latin America, which arguably is not that important from a global economic perspective, but does have some ideological or other types of significance for the administration. I think if you were to ask the secretary, what he would say is that Milei deserves or needs more time to sort of put his program into place, and the administration is there to help do that. But that is for others to sort of judge, whether that's a sound policy or not.
Dan, I think it's important to note that this is reporting here is that this idea is under discussion, right? There wasn't a deal or a program announced today. So do we think this is actually going to happen, or is the strategy maybe that the secretary just floating the possibility of the support is enough to, as he said, bridge the government from now until these midterm elections?
Yeah, that's a great point, Kate. In his social media post this morning, Secretary Bessent outlined a number of options that the Treasury could take with regard to Argentina, the main one, of course, being this $20 billion swap line. It's important to note, of course, that Argentina would not need to avail itself of that entire amount, but it's available up to that amount, per se. Of course, the phrase that the Secretary used was that there are negotiations around that amount and around this offer. There is a school of thought out there, certainly, not a small number of people, that this is simply the U.S. signaling to the market that this is on offer, not necessarily that it will extend it.
Dan, thanks for the insights, as always. Bloomberg's Dan Flatley in New York. To a Bloomberg exclusive now. Apple, the latest company to engage in talks with Intel, which includes both a potential investment and partnership. Talks are in the early stages and may not lead to an agreement, according to people close to the private deliberations. But a deal between Apple and Intel would follow a $5 billion investment we told you about last week by NVIDIA, as well as an unconventional deal brokered in August, giving the U.S. government a 10% stake in Intel. For a look at how stocks moved on this news, we turn to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, live at World Headquarters in New York. Romaine?
Yeah, and don't forget, also a $2 billion investment in Intel by SoftBank. In fact, the investments continue to come for a stock and a company that a lot of people had left behind in the tech and AI trade. Intel got a big boost from that news today, and we should point out there are still unconfirmed reports. You saw a move higher of about 6.5%, and we should point out in the after-hours trade, Intel continues to move higher, up an additional 2% here. And that has been a big part of the focus for this market right now. Not just the AI and tech trade, but the companies that are directly benefiting from their proximity to what we presume is the Trump administration. Take Oracle, another stock that, of course, has been on fire. They actually moved the market earlier today, but it wasn't the equity market, it was the Treasury market. Oracle announcing that they're going to sell $18 billion in debt to help finance their AI build-out. That had a huge impact on Treasury prices, which actually rose here on the day. The idea that now there is competition in this fixed income space from some of these big companies. The AI trade is pretty much the dominant trade, Joe, as you know, and the AI trade directly links back to some of the nudging that we're getting out of Washington, whether it's the comments by President Trump or whether it's a more, behind the scenes nudging that we're hearing from the Treasury Secretary that played out in a big way today with Intel. We'll see how that plays out in the cash session tomorrow.
Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, thank you. Coming up, a military airplane transporting the Spanish defense minister suffered a GPS attack when it was traveling to Lithuania. We'll discuss the suspicions surrounding the incident with Brandon Pugh, principal cyber advisor to the Secretary of the Army, up ahead. But first, we're less than a week away from a government shutdown. We'll discuss how lawmakers are working to avert this impending deadline with Republican Congressman Carlos Gimenez of Florida on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's in both parties' interest to have a performative shutdown. It's in Trump's and Republicans' interest to remind everybody just whose fault the debt and deficit are, pin that particular tail on the Democratic donkey. So now all we're talking about really is, who's going to nod at who and say they won something. And, Democrats are kind of desperate to say they won anything.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kate Davidson, I'm Joe Matthew. That, of course, Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy, talking with us on the early edition of Balance of Power today about the prospect of a government shutdown now about a week away.
And with the lawmakers on both sides of the aisle now in a standoff, we have just a few days until that deadline. Joining us now with the latest live from Capitol Hill is Bloomberg's Megan Scully. Megan, can you just give us an update on the state of talks and where are we at this point?
Sure. So actually, I'm just leaving an interview with the top Democratic leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, and all signals from him are that Democrats are remaining resolute in this fight. They have centralized their message on health care. These increased premiums for Affordable Care Act enrollees that are due to go into effect on January 1st, as well as the Medicaid cuts that were in Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. They are demanding that any deal that they sign off on to avert a government shutdown address these two matters. Their asks come with a heavy price tag, though, of $1.5 trillion. And as of now, Republicans have said no to all of the above.
Well, they sure have. The president today was posting about this on Truth Social, explaining that the standoff here is why he does not plan to meet with the leadership tomorrow. Did Leader Jeffries speak to that? Because a lot of folks see that decision by the president as ensuring that we'll have a shutdown in a week.
Yeah, so he reiterated that, the ball is in Republicans' court. We asked him if he was sitting by the phone, and he kind of demurred on that about whether or not the president would give him a call. But they have been demanding, he and Senator Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, have been demanding meetings both with Senate Republican leaders and House Republican leaders, as well as the president for well over a week now. We are in a matter of who's to blame, with Democrats, of course, saying Republicans are to blame and Republicans saying Democrats are to blame. Remember, unlike on the big tax bill that passed this summer, this spending bill requires the support of at least 7 Senate Democrats. So Republicans need to forge some kind of compromise with the Democrats to avert a shutdown. Democrats just 6 months ago caved to Republican demands because they were concerned about what a shutdown would look like just 2 months into the Trump administration, that Trump was too powerful at that moment for them to risk it. They are gambling now, however, that risking it is in their best political interest, and they are reiterating time and again in the best interest of the American people.
Stakes are high at the moment. Bloomberg's Megan Scully with us live from Capitol Hill. Megan, thank you for setting the table there for more reaction on this possible government shutdown, the funding deadline on the September 30th. We turn to Republican Congressman Carlos Gimenez of Florida with us live from Miami. Congressman, it's good to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg. The president posting on Truth Social this evening after reviewing the details of what he calls the unserious and ridiculous demands from Democrats. I've decided that no meeting with their congressional leaders could possibly be productive. Is that the right move right now?
Well, right now, look, what the Democrats are trying to do is undo everything that we got and did in the big, beautiful bill, the tax cut for working families. And so, no, it's a non-starter. The Democrats are asking for $1 trillion more in spending. That's something that we just can't do. I agree with your reporter. There has to be some give and take because we do need to get 7 Democrats on the Senate side, but their demands are just way too much, and it's impossible. Right now, the House shipped to the Senate a clean continuing resolution, basically operating under the same principles that we've been operating for the last 9 months. The big beautiful bill, those provisions start taking effect, but no, we're not going to. We worked too hard to pass that bill that gives tax breaks to the majority of working Americans, also extends the Trump era tax cuts. If we didn't do that, it would have been the largest tax increase in American history, and we're not going to undo that, and that's what the Democrats are asking us to do.
So, Congressman, are there any compromises that you're willing to make?
Yeah, look, one of the things that you talked about was the premiums on the ACA and the Affordable Care Act, and so I'm in support of that, and I think a number of my colleagues are in support. Doesn't mean all of them are. We have some issues there. There could be a way to pay for that, and that's something that I certainly would consider. So there are ways that we can compromise, but we're not going to. It's not going to be $1 trillion of additional spending that we're going to agree to. If the government shuts down, it's on the Democrats. Like I said, we sent them a clean CR, a clean continuing resolution. There weren't any no gotchas in there. Just this is the way we've been operating. Here we go. We're going to cooperate the same way. You know, and we're asking. I think it's only like a month and a half, if that, of this CR, so that we have, you know, another month and a half to go through appropriations process, and then come November, late November, then either we have our appropriations done or we have to look at another CR. But we need to keep the government running. It's if the government doesn't run, a lot of people are going to get hurt. And frankly, I'm a Republican, but it's on the Democrats this time because the Republican House passed a clean CR.
Well, of course, it went to the Senate, and it failed in the Senate, and a Democratic version also failed in the Senate. And we had our ears open when Chuck Schumer showed up on TV this morning. An open collar minority leader on Morning Joe on MSNBC, Congressman, had this to say about it.
We know how bad it is. And we're asking something very simple, Joe, for the president to sit down and talk with us. You know, he's not the king. He can't just dictate what happened. He said he doesn't need Democrats. Well, then he doesn't know how to count, because there are 60 votes in this Senate that you need to pass this, and he's got 53.
The Senate's got a bigger problem at the moment, it seems like, Congressman. And I know that the House is not back until after the deadline. Is it incumbent on the Senate to finish the job here?
Look, I think if the Senate comes up with a CR and bounces it back to the House, I'm sure that the Speaker is going to call us back as soon as we get that, so that we can vote on it. If something that Senate Republicans can agree to and actually get a 60-vote threshold, I think the Speaker will call us back, and we're going to try to get back as soon as possible.
To town for that?
Oh, heck yeah, man! You know, that's what I get paid to do. You know, so anytime the Speaker wants us back, we'll be back. And last thing we want to do is have a government shutdown. Yeah.
Congressman, the shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas is the latest tragic example of political violence. As a lawmaker, what steps are you taking to help turn down the temperature in political rhetoric right now?
Well, look, I mean, the political violence that we're seeing right now, you know, I think a lot of it is fueled by some of the rhetoric. You know, I think we need to speak to each other in a more civil tone, but also, you know, some of the stuff that's been talked about ICE agents, that they're Gestapo and Nazis and stuff like that. Hey, that riles people up, you know, and so I would ask my colleagues on the other side, hey, you know, I think you need to tone that down. There is never an excuse for political violence. You know, our founding fathers created this country. They wanted debate. They wanted robust debate, but they wanted that debate to be settled at the ballot box, not through violence. And you know, those are the principles that we have to get back to. Yeah, we can disagree with each other. We can disagree with each other in a very vociferous way, very robust way, very passionate way, but never, ever, ever resort to violence. And somehow that message has to, you know, be pushed, you know, throughout the land. And these acts of political violence from the right, from the left, from whoever, need to be rejected by both sides as forcefully as we can.
Congressman, I've got less than a minute, and I don't want to have to cut you off, but of course you were born in Havana in 1954, and I know that free speech means something to you.
Don't tell everybody that.
The government.
Okay. Okay.
Are you worried the American government is no longer tolerating the First Amendment?
No, look, I was speaking against censorship during the last administration, where the government was actually involved in trying to shut down dissenting points of view. I don't agree with the government getting involved at all in censorship. I mean, it's against the First Amendment. Whoever does it.
Got it.
And so it's not. This is not just something that supposedly started now.
Well,
this happened also in the previous administration.
Carlos Gimenez of Florida. Join us when we have more time on Bloomberg.
The investigation led us to the New York tri-state area, where investigators discovered tens of thousands of co-located and networked cellular devices capable of carrying out nefarious telecommunications attacks. This network had the potential to disable cell phone towers and essentially shut down the cellular network in New York City. We will continue working towards identifying those responsible and their intent, including whether their plan was to disrupt the UN General Assembly and communications of government and emergency personnel during the official visit of world leaders in and around New York City.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Kate Davidson. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. That was FBI Special Agent in Charge Matt McCool of the New York field office in a video that was released by the Secret Service after the agency says it dismantled a network of devices across the New York metro area that could have potentially threatened officials from around the world ahead of the UN General Assembly.
Now we're learning more about how the operation was thwarted. Here's the Bloomberg headline: Threats to Trump aide sparked Secret Service SIM card probe. That story written by Bloomberg's Myles Miller, who joins us with the very latest. Myles, could you just start by walking us through how this worked? Essentially, how would a room full of SIM cards shut down phone service at the UN?
Yeah, so what we know from this investigation by the Secret Service is that these were a bunch of SIM cards that were in devices in buildings that were in locations around New York City. You had up in Westchester, you had in Greenwich, Connecticut, you had in Queens and in northern New Jersey. And say, using these devices, they all called 911 at the same time. What that would lead to would be catastrophe, right? The New York City phone system having issues getting calls through to 911. They could do mass fraud using that. So if they wanted to send a bunch of text messages to multiple phone numbers all at once, they could. This was a very sophisticated operation, which the Secret Service says has ties to foreign actors as well as ties to organized crime. And they were able to investigate this because it was getting closer and closer to the Oval Office, to the West Wing of the White House.
Tell us more about that, Myles. Your reporting has been fascinating today, that there were some phones ringing inside the White House, which alerted the Secret Service to this existing in the first place.
Right, the Secret Service is very cautious not to name the officials who had been targeted by these folks who were behind the cell phone situation, the attacks, because they did not want to tip them off to just how much they know. But we're told that these are two senior officials who are very close to the president and another law enforcement official who has very close ties to the president. We are told that in one of these instances, there was a swatting attack at that individual's home. In another instance, it was threatening phone calls. And what we know is that the Secret Service took this very seriously, starting in July, working backwards, going through the phone numbers, trying to figure out what numbers called to do this attack. And then in addition to that, what they knew was that all these SIM cards were concentrated in a specific area. How did they know that? Well, in some of the same ways that law enforcement has been able to track down weed growing operations inside of apartments, you start to see the Con Ed bill go up. You start to see and if you're in D.C., your Pepco bill goes up. It's the same thing with this. What they were seeing was that there was a high concentration of calls in one area. We're able to zero in on that building, or on these several buildings, and that's how they were able to bring this case, to really where it is today. They're trying to track down who's behind it, but they found in some of these instances cocaine and drugs in one of these buildings. And so what they know is that this is a investigation that has tentacles, and they're going to continue doing the investigative work on this.
Boy, what a story. Myles, thank you. Bloomberg's Myles Miller on the North Lawn of the White House. To discuss this story and much more here on our Washington Bureau is Brandon Pugh, the principal cyber advisor to the Secretary of the Army. He's the equivalent of a three-star general officer in a role that was created by Congress just in 2019. Brandon, great to have you in our studio. Thank you for joining. I do want to start with you on this before we get on to matters that are closer to your remit. The fact that this was caught in advance, is this an example of the system working, or does there need to be another military component to securing telecom now for the president?
Yeah, Joe, really glad to be here. I think this story illuminates a lot, and I know it's still active under investigation. We're still learning details, but it does show the bigger problem is that this is an evolving threat landscape. Adversaries and enemies, regardless, are leveraging cyber techniques. And I know we're still learning who's behind this, but it does illuminate for services like myself in the Army of what an adversary might do, and it puts the burden on us to stay ahead of an adversary and continue to make sure we're ready for that future fight, that future battlefield, which we're doing now in the Army through what we call continuous transformation.
So we've also seen several times high-profile heads of state in Europe have the GPS in their aircraft meddled with. So what is the Army's defense around ensuring the global positioning system is firm?
Yeah, I think that there's really no simple solution to that. It's really a holistic solution to make sure we're secured as we can as an Army. So I would say, something we're looking at now is, what is the threat profile and how do we make sure we're ahead of that? We want to continue to make sure that we're ahead of whatever that adversary might do. And a key part of that is making sure our soldiers have the right technology and defenses themselves quickly. And I think that's been too long the challenge of the Pentagon. It takes years to get them the technology and the equipment they need to stay ahead of that adversary. And as stories like this show, that time is just not on our side.
Continuing transformation is a fascinating term, and I'd like to hear more from you on what that includes. You're helping to oversee FUZE, right? The Army's venture capital-like program that is looking to invest a massive amount of money, $750 million a year on advanced tech programs that can leverage a lot of the technologies that we talk about here on Bloomberg every day to that continuous approach that you're looking at. This is sort of big think right now, but can you help our listeners and viewers understand what that means on a practical level?
100%. So continuous transformation, starting there, has been really something that our Secretary Driscoll, along with Chief of Staff Randy George, have thought of. Mm-hmm. They want to make sure the Army is prepared as it can for that future fight, which we know is quickly evolving. And they've identified, savings $48 billion over the course of 5 years. And what they're doing now is reinvesting that into capabilities that we need in the battlefield, like drones. Perhaps we don't need Humvees anymore, but we need increased cyber capabilities. But a key part of that, as you allude to, is acquisition. How do we make sure soldiers are getting this not in a period of years, but hopefully in the period of 30 to 45 days, which is precisely what FUZE is looking to do, is if you're an innovative company, we want your product to come to us and see if we have a home for it in the Army. Within 10 days, there could be a pathway to funding. Within 30 to 45 days, there could be a prototype in an actual Army unit.
Incredible.
And if you're familiar with the Pentagon, 30 to 45 days
is a time warp.
Lightning speed.
So when you're talking about companies like AeroVironment or Anduril, they're getting a lot of buzz right now. Smaller companies that are making drones, autonomous equipment that I think you're referring to in many cases here when it comes to continuous transformation. Are these going to replace the big old line defense contractors, the Raytheons and Lockheeds of the world, or will they be working together at some point?
No, I think there's a need for all types of companies. I think too long time that we've had the largest companies, kind of be the source of innovation. Not saying they're being replaced, but we do need companies of all sizes. So if you're a small startup company or a VC-backed company and you have a novel innovation, we want to hear from that. We were trying to get away from the days where the Army identified a problem and we sought a solution. Yeah. We want it to be the inverse. A local, CEO of a tech company, come to us with a potential solution. And just for your listeners, there's 4 buckets essentially we're looking at: electronic warfare, UAS, counter UAS, so think of drones, and energy generation. Not to say we won't have future areas, but at least to start, those are the 4 sources we want innovation to come in.
So how close are we to warfare with no humans on the battlefield?
Yeah, so that's a constant question. When AI kind of came to prominence with generative AI, I guess 2.5 years in, that was the initial question people had. So I say it really puts a burden on us to make sure we're using the technology ourselves. Adversaries are not going to be bound by whatever law or policies we have here, but how can we fully leverage, like artificial intelligence is one example, to combat that adversary? We're doing it now, but I think that's an area we should continue to lean into to use AI against a bad actor.
It's really interesting how much this sounds like conversations we have with high-tech CEOs, with venture capital. I mean, that is essentially what we're talking about here is VC inside the Pentagon. You're looking at the same technologies. You're looking at the same attempt to raise money. You're looking at integration on a similar timeline. And even you said energy. It sounds like I'm talking to an executive who's building a data center.
And honestly, I can't take credit for it. It's really Secretary Driscoll, who's my boss. He comes from a VC mindset, so this was his innovation. I think, he likes to call it like calcified bureaucracy. He's like, we got to get beyond this 5 to 10 year acquisition cycle. That's not suitable for us. We need that tech in the hands of a soldier as quickly as possible. And secondly, it's like, also, we need the soldier to see if it's actually going to work. Rather than go through the entire process just to learn this isn't actually the capability the Army needs. Yeah. Is this a viable product for us? Let's put it in an actual unit and see firsthand.
Wow.
From a cybersecurity perspective, what sort of risks do you see from broader adoption of AI, and how is the Army bracing for that?
So I think that's, AI has tremendous potential for defenders. And I think that's where I like to lead with saying, how are we leveraging it to defend against ourselves and also to carry out cyber, affects ourselves. But being mindful of adversaries are going to use AI. And we've seen that at the most basic level. It makes our traditional attacks easier, like phishing campaigns, where essentially we're trying to fake somebody to believe that we're actually somebody else. So they are doing that. I think that puts the burden on us to make sure we're continuing to evolve the tech to stay ahead of wherever that adversary is.
Are you working with the companies that we hear about in the private sector, the CrowdStrikes, the Palo Altos? Or does the Pentagon have its own proprietary cyber software to protect your systems?
You know, I mean, without going into too many specifics, it is a mix. Yeah. I would say there is definitely a home for commercial solutions in the Pentagon, but there are unique needs the Pentagon has itself. So it is, I'd say, a healthy balance for where we are.
Does that include your own AI?
Exactly. So, our CIO has been a leader on enterprise use cases. Wow. Where I'm leading my office is how are we leveraging AI in the cyber context? And we are doing that. I think that's going to be a source for us to continue to invest in.
Really interesting.
Brendan Pugh, Principal Cyber Advisor to the Secretary of the Army. Thank you for being here. Coming up, President Trump taps former Republican presidential candidate and retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson for a new role in the administration. We'll bring you the details. And Jimmy Kimmel makes his late-night return with an emotional monologue. We'll discuss with our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Kate Davidson, I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for joining us. We'll turn back to our conversation about what could be a government shutdown a week from now with our political panel in just a moment. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. A shooting at an ICE center in Dallas today was described by a federal law enforcement official as a, quote, act of targeted violence against the immigration agency. At least 2 people were killed, including the shooter, from a self-inflicted gunshot, several others injured. It's believed some of the injured were detainees. Dallas police say a suspect opened fire from an adjacent building. Rounds found near the shooter appeared to have anti-ICE messages, according to the FBI special agent who briefed the media. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, in a statement, said, quote, this shooting must serve as a wake-up call to the far left that their rhetoric about ICE has consequences, unquote.
Measles infections in the U.S. have reached more than 1,500 this year, reaching levels not seen since 1992. The Centers for Disease Control reported that there are cases in 41 states, with fresh outbreaks in Utah and Arizona. Public health experts are alarmed by the surge in cases as childhood vaccination rates continue to fall. Under the leadership of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the CDC's vaccine panel voted earlier this week to recommend children 4 and under not receive the MMRV vaccine that prevents measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox.
Former Republican presidential candidate and retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson will take on a temporary role as a senior nutrition and housing advisor at the U.S. Agriculture Department. Carson expected to help advance the Make America Healthy Again agenda through developing U.S. dietary guidelines and working toward removing products like soda, candy, and desserts from SNAP.
And an open House seat in Arizona will stay in Democratic control after Adelita Grijalva won yesterday's special election for the state's 7th district, a seat held by her late father, who served in Congress for more than 2 decades. Her win further narrows the already razor-thin Republican majority in the House and sets the stage for a forced floor vote to release government files on convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Grijalva has pledged to support the petition, which appears to give it the crucial number of votes to proceed. The Congresswoman-elect will be sworn in when the House returns October 8th, unless a shutdown forces them back earlier.
Keep that in mind. Joining us now with their reaction to this story and much more, this evening's political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributor and Democratic strategist Adam Hodge is with us, the managing director at Bully Pulpit International, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, president CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. We've got a great panel tonight. Welcome to both of you. It's great to see you both here.
Good to see you.
I'm just going to rip off the Band-Aid on the Epstein thing so we can talk about the shutdown situation. Democrats win in Arizona. That's the vote that's needed. So discharge goes to the floor.
It does.
But it doesn't pass the Senate, right? Does this actually change anything?
I don't believe it passes the Senate. So I don't think overall it will pass. It will mean anything at all.
Do your members care?
They do, but they're working on other things like government shutdown, so it's not a top priority.
Well, and there's
for
a
them.
parallel effort in the Oversight Committee as well. That might be the way these documents are released, or do we never see them, Sarah?
I think it's 50-50 if we see them, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know that answer yet.
But it does keep this issue front and center, and an issue that the White House does not want to talk about at all.
lawmakers called to vote now. Republicans will have to vote on this. That's what you mean.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it will be a news cycle. There'll be more talking about this and not talking about the other things that the president would rather be talking about.
Unless we're in government shutdown.
Here we are.
So,
there we go.
Speaking of which, we'll start to see agencies putting out their shutdown plans in the next few days. What are the government functions to watch that, if they're closed, to make a shutdown really politically unpopular?
I mean, I think clearly they will try to keep the Social Security payments going, all the Medicare and Medicaid payments going. But there'll be a lot of people who will be put on, on furlough, and they may or may not get paid. Having been in the administration through 2 shutdowns in the Obama administration, and then threatening around the Biden administration, it's a lot of work for the administration that takes time away from doing their everyday jobs. And then you get into a place where it then gets hard to then turn the government back on. How do you figure out, at Treasury and in the Obama administration, some payments were being made, but some offices were shut down. Some people went on furlough. It was really hard and really disruptive to the government. But that's the stakes that we're up against.
Well, we keep hearing that Russ Vought is looking forward to that selection process if he has the opportunity. And we'll remind our listeners and viewers that Sarah Chamberlain's crystal ball is more famous than most in Washington. You told us 2 months ago that there was a shutdown coming. Where's your heart now?
Unfortunately,
where's your gut now?
Unfortunately, I think I'm going to be proven right. I'd love to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
But I think after Chuck Schumer, if you remember a few months ago, he got a lot of flack from his far left.
Sure did.
I don't think he has any wiggle room this time. Obviously, the House, we gave him a clean CR for 7 weeks. I just don't think we're going to get to 60 in the Senate. So I do see government shutdown coming. And I agree. I don't know how we reopen the government. And, not only do people in the government not get paid, hopefully more of them will get paid like the military, but we're really focused at Main Street. The businesses around, those people do not get the makeup of what they lose. People, it's terrible. People live on a budget. They need their paychecks, but they will ultimately get paid if they get furloughed. The restaurants, all the business, the dry cleaners, all those small businesses around servicing those people would never make up the revenue that's lost, and that's very concerning.
I think the key difference between March and now is the healthcare element that was not part of the conversation back in March, right? The big beautiful bill, the big ugly bill, however you want to describe it. Like now we're looking at 1.5 million Americans could lose their health care because of the cuts that were part of the health care. And what Democrats have said is, look, we'll work with you to keep the government open. We got to address this one important issue.
Are you talking Medicaid or Obamacare subsidies?
The Obamacare in the subsidies. So 1.5 million Americans could lose their coverage. But also premiums could go up for millions of Americans in the marketplace, because the insurance companies are writing the policies and premiums now for when
and you obviously
the new
believe
year.
If this isn't settled in this negotiation, it's not going to happen later in the year?
Exactly, but for 2 reasons. One, the well has been poisoned on any budget negotiations, and with the rescissions that the administration has taken, with just the blatant violation of the Congress's authority on spending, there's no trust that the Republicans are going to come back to try to solve this problem that they created in the first place with the big ugly bill. So I think that's a real thing the Democrats have in their quiver, and Republicans are on the defensive on the budget shutdown now, where they weren't many weeks ago.
And of course, Republicans say that Democrats are.
Absolutely. So I've got the complete, do the clean CR for 7 weeks and let's come to the table and start talking about those issues. That's not what's going on. The Democrats are like, we talk now or we're not talking at all. Give them a clean CR, 7 weeks, keep the government open, and then come to the table and have those discussions.
I think for Democrats, though, the clean CR does nothing to stop the health care cuts. Even if you do a clean CR, you still have 1.5 million Americans who have their health care threatened. Premiums still go up. And I think if I'm thinking about the market also, health insurers really got to be worried about, so the stocks to watch. That's a real thing to keep in mind. They stand to lose millions and millions of dollars in revenue. Certainly, if they lose customers from the marketplace, that's a real threat to their bottom line as you go into the fall and into the new year.
So what are the forcing actions that we could see in the next few days that bring Republicans and Democrats to the negotiating table?
To me, I thought it was a little bit politically dumb for Mike Johnson to say we're not bringing the members back if there's a shutdown. To send them home through October 1st seemed a little bit foolish to me, but hey, I don't give Mike Johnson free political advice. I think that there is a real opportunity for Democrats to all come back to Washington and say, look, we're here to meet, we're here to solve this problem. Come back to Washington and solve it. They wanted to meet with the president. He said they'd meet. Then he pulled the meeting because I don't think he wants to talk about health care. He wants to talk about the radical left and all the issues.
I don't think that President Trump actually thought that they were going to come with good faith to negotiate with him. And you don't see the Democrats coming back. They're not here. The House members aren't here. And then demanding that the Republican House members come back.
It is an interesting move, though, for Speaker Johnson to have the return come after the shutdown date, right? You left it in the Senate's hands.
We did.
Good luck with that, Thune and Schumer.
But if the Democrats are really serious, bring the House back. He could bring them back and then try to say, okay, well, we're back to negotiate. We're the Republican members. I mean, it's not happening. That's why you guys are, 18% approval rating?
Well, the House Republicans aren't that much higher, but
we are higher, though, thank goodness.
I think the real, to me, I think it's an opportunity. If I was Schumer or Jeffries, I think the House is bringing their members, House Democrats, back on Monday regardless, is what I've been hearing. Bring them back and have them stand there and say, we're willing to vote. I mean, they did have a Democratic alternative in the CR that would have addressed some of the health care issues that we're talking about. But I think the fact that we're even talking about health care right now is a sign that I think this is an issue that even Republicans view as a risk. And it's one worth solving.
Well, I hate to interrupt this conversation about policy, but the president just got to Truth Social, and he's writing about a real disgrace. Apparently very upset about what took place yesterday at the United Nations. We've all heard about Escalator Gate.
Yes.
The findings by the United Nations are not satisfying the president. He says a real disgrace took place, not one but two, but three very sinister events. First, the escalator going up to the main speaking floor came to a screeching halt. It stopped on a dime. It is amazing that Melania and I did not fall forward under the sharp edges of those steel steps. We're showing you that view on Bloomberg TV, and it doesn't look like anybody almost fell. But, Sarah, the UN told us that it was, in fact, a White House videographer going up the stairwell or the escalator backwards that tripped the whole thing. Is this a little distraction from the shutdown talk? Or
it is a little distraction. Yeah. I mean, he likes to distract.
Is there a strategy here, Adam?
I don't think so.
No, there's no strategy. It's just chaos. I mean, that chaos is the strategy.
Well, why did they stop the escalator on it?
I mean,
I think it was an accident that they stopped the escalator.
His own team. I mean, at least he got a gold escalator. Right?
He did get a gold one.
Who knew the UN had a golden escalator?
I did not, actually. It was news.
Maybe they need a new teleprompter. He's saying that was also done intentionally before his speech.
I saw that. It wasn't working well.
No?
I mean, the worst line from anybody, when you blame the refs or blaming other things for your problems, you got even bigger problems.
Well, what his real issue is that he wanted to build it. If you remember,
that's right. He said you could be walking on marble. Apparently, he's isolating a third problem. Their earpieces were not working. He says world leaders said the sound was completely off in the auditorium where the speech was made. Although we did see them give a nice round of applause when it was over.
This
could take a half hour to read. It's so long.
I mean, at least he didn't get laughed at this time.
Well, that was 2018. They only laughed at the jokes. Adam Hodge, Sarah Chamberlain, we covered a lot of ground. We thank you both, as always. And a programming note for tomorrow, make sure to tune into Bloomberg Surveillance, as if you don't already. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, for a conversation with the newest Fed Governor, Stephen Myron. And later, the close tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, for Bloomberg News Editor-in-Chief John Micklethwaite's conversation with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Thank you for joining us, as always, on Balance of Power. Alongside Kate Davidson, I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.